Hi Not Board Gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be previewing a game which hits Kickstarter on the 8th of March. The link will be in the description below. And this game is of course Hamlet from Mighty Boards, designed by the very David Chircop. That's right, the David Chircop who designed the wonderful Petrichor, which had a kind of a deluxeified and expansions versions just delivered to Kickstarter backers fairly recently. However, coming to Kickstarter on the 8th of March, and as I say, the link is in the description below, is Hamlet, a village building game designed by David Chircop. And of course, with this being Not Board Gaming, we're going to be looking at the solo mode. And the solo mode was designed by Nick Shaw and David Turczi, and it is a fantastic solo mode. So, what is Hamlet? So what is Hamlet? Well, I'm British, and if I was to say the word Hamlet to a British or an English person or somebody that's aware of our culture, potentially one of three things would happen. You'd think of one of three things. The first one being a Shakespearean play. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. Yeah, maybe acting wasn't within my forte. The other thing would be, of course, the cigars, which were very big in the 70s and 80s. And the third would be a very small village. You see, British naming conventions, English naming conventions for towns and villages are a little bit weird. A hamlet is actually a village without a church. Once any hamlet gets a church, it becomes a village. Then if you look at things like towns and cities, a town is a large gathering of people without a cathedral. In a place without a cathedral, as soon as a town gets a cathedral, it becomes a city. So, if we go back to Hamlet, the aim of Hamlet, and it says there it's a village building game, is to try and build a church using resources around you. You're going to use wheat and ore and wood to create planks of wood, and you're going to create flour, and you're going to create milk, and you're going to create brick to try and then build the church. And that's the aim of the game. Is it's a tile laying game where you're going to buy tiles and put tiles into a bag and draw tiles out of a bag, buy those tiles and expand your hamlet, start to improve the resources that are available for you, managing those resources and trying to get the right resources so that you can build the right things for the church. And as you get those resources, you can bring them to the church and complete certain items on the church. When you complete all of those church requirements, then that's it. That triggers the end of the game. So although it's about building a church, there's absolutely zero religion involved in this. The church is purely a kind of an end game mechanism and a reason to give you to make you want to go out there and improve your hamlet and your resource facilities so that you can get that. So yeah, it's as I say, it's a tile laying resource management game, which is really kind of quaint and really fun and belies a lot of depth, to tell you the truth. So it plays 1 to 4 players, but of course we're going to be looking purely at the solo mode. So I'm not going to do a massive in-depth rules dive on Hamlet. What I'll do is I'll show you kind of how the game looks at setup and how it differs ever so slightly, and then we'll just go through some of the actions that you get and then give you a flavour of how Hamlet plays solo. Now, really important thing to stress is this is obviously a prototype. These are not the finished assets. So without much further ado, let me show you kind of how you set up a Hamlet for a solo player, and then just some of the turns and how it plays. So, welcome to Hamlet. Now, this is the setup for a 2-player game or a solo game. It's a similar setup. We would use different size tiles if you're playing a 3 to 4 player game. And I'll just want to explain what the tiles are that you have here. So, well, one main tile. If we look in the middle, and as you can see, all the tiles work very nicely. You'll see the church tile, which is this here. Now, in the solo and 2-player game, you have to satisfy 4 criteria to trigger the end of the game. in the 3 to 4 player game, you have to trigger 5 criteria, but of course we're on solo here. So this is the church. This is what we're trying to get built here in the centre of your hamlet, to make your hamlet a village. And there's various criteria you have to satisfy here. So here we have to pay 10 gold. Here we have to give either 3 milk or 3 brick. Here is 3 planks of wood or 3 wheat, and here we have to give 10 of the resources that are available, these starting resources. And I'll explain how resources happen, because the starting resources get refined to become these resources. Once all of those have been satisfied, then that triggers the end of the game, and you will then win the game if you have more points than Botrick, the AI. And if you're playing with more than one player, then of course your other players. You can see these here. These are victory points here. So whoever completes that criteria gets those victory points. So 6, 4, 4, and 6 there. So that's kind of the flow of the game. There is you're aiming to get your resources, get enough resources, so that you can complete all of those tasks on the church and complete your church. But how do you do that? You see, Hamlet is a game of roads and pathways. Now you will see that there is some pathways here. This leads here, this leads to the church, this leads to the church, and this leads to the church there. Because you have to get these resources back to the church, and the only way to do that is along pathways. As you expand the tiles, you will put new tiles down, but they may not have pathways on there, so you have to build roads as well. But you're also going to use donkeys to transport your goods along on the path to get your goods and your raw materials back to the church, so you can satisfy this church criteria. Because Hamlet is a game about building the entire village. And here you can see the entire game laid out for the solo gamer. It would be almost similar with a 2-player gamer. So we'll start over here with the scoreboard. Okay, so on the scoreboard, which you may not be able to see just yet, we're starting on 0 there, and you will rack up victory points as the game progresses. We're going to put some starting tiles, some opening tiles on the top of here in a wee while, and I'll talk about the tiles in a second. Now there are also a number of these awards as well. The green ones guarantee you points in game, and the red ones are points that you get at the end of the game for completing or for being, I don't know, having the most sales on the market or having the most church deliveries at the end of the game. You will get additional victory points for that. Over here is my player. So I'm going to play the blue player, okay? And you'll see, if we look here, we have some various resources, and you can just see the little stickers on there. With the white side, that means it's just a standard quality resource. On the black side, it means it's a high quality. But these are refined resources. You see, you're going to start off only having basic resources on the board, and I'll explain how that works. We have some little roads. Bear in mind, I say these aren't the finished assets by a long stretch of the imagination at the moment. So the game is still obviously only going to hit Kickstarter on the 8th of March. So you have some roads. We have some other markers. We have these round discs, which are our donkeys, and I've got a feeling there may well be donkey meeples in the finished game. And we have 4 of our worker meeples as well. So that's my stuff, and I'm going to start the game with just 2 gold. I'm going to come back to the AI player in a second. I mentioned other resources. So if we look here, we've got some white, some orange, and some black resources, and they go onto the board. So white I've denoted as wheat, black I've denoted as ore, and orange I've denoted as wood. So we've got some wood resources, ore resources, and wheat resources over there, and you'll be putting them on the board and taking them off the board throughout the game. We also have, of course, coins there. And here we have our tiles to go in the bag. You see, you're going to start off with this setting in more or less every game. You can potentially mix and match where you put the tiles, but you're going to start off with these tiles, and then you have all these tiles which have a bag symbol on them. They're all going to go into the black bag. So you put them into the black bag. These are all your starting tiles, and you're going to draw 3 out at the beginning of the game. So what we've drawn a trade post. That's going to go on just above my scoreboard there, and that's 0 space. We've got to draw next one. So look, we're drawing a small woodland, so that's going to go there. I'm just going to shift those out of the way. I'll explain those in a second. And then we're also going to draw the third one, which is going to be a pond. There we go. That's going to go above the third slot there. So they're my starting tiles in my bag. Throughout the game, I'm going to get the ability to add other tiles in the game, and these are either landmarks or refineries. And refineries are where you start taking some of the basic resources and turning them into some of the refined resources that we're looking at. So if we look at a landmark, for example, so here we go. So we got this. It's got a flag on it, and it's got a build cost on there, and that's down at the bottom. So that's a landmark one. A refinery has these spaces here, these little octagonal spaces, octagonal spaces, where you're going to put your resources on there. So it has build costs and also refinery costs, and that's where, for example, here I can turn wheat into dairy there, and dairy I can then use, if we look back on the church, to start satisfying my criteria. So you've got to get these on the board at some point, but they don't start on the board to start off with. And there are four of those. We have kind of the wheat-based ones, the dairy ones, the brick, and the lumber or the wood, and they're all off the board, and they will get added to my black bag at some point. But you only start off with your basic tiles to start off with. So that's the tile situation started, and we may talk about how you get tiles in a wee while, because that's a very important part of the game, cycling through those tiles. Okay, so that's more or less everything explained. Let's go back to Bottrick. So as a solo player, you're going to take on Bottrick, and Bottrick is the AI that's going to mimic a human player. So down here I've got Bottrick as the green player, and you can see that I have three discs down here. I have a red disc, a yellow disc, and a green disc. Now there are four. The game comes with 4 player colours, so you're going to use all of the other 3 player colours basically. As a solo gamer, you're going to be one colour, Bottrick is going to be the other colours. And these discs are going to denote which of my kind of secondary actions I take. Now what you do is you take 3 discs of one colour that you're not using, 2 discs of another colour that you're not using, and then 1 disc of Bottrick's own colour. So you've got 6 discs, and you're going to add all those into a bag. Now you're going to need your own bag or cup. It doesn't come with the game, and that's going to dictate what action. Well, partially dictate what actions Bottrick takes. You see, he has primary actions, and that's these at the top here, and that one is to hire a worker. That one is to deliver to the church, and that one is to buy from the market, because there's a market just there. If he can't take any of those actions, then Bottrick is going to draw a disc out of here. So say it's this one, it's the yellow one, and that will denote which action he's going to take. So for example, yellow there means he's going to build a road. Now if that happens, what would happen is Bottrick would complete that action of building a road, okay, and that particular disc would move to the right hand side, and all of the others would slide down. And therefore you have this kind of dynamic way of creating unknowns in the way that Bottrick's going to move, depending on which disc he draws out of the bag, and of course where these tokens are placed to start off with. Now there is obviously a higher percentage of red tokens in the bag, so there's a great percentage is always going to perform. A great percentage if it gets down to these actions, the left-hand action is going to be performed, but that's not guaranteed, and that's a really smart way that it happens. So that's kind of the run of the game. What you're going to do is take it in turns, and I'll explain how that works in a second. Bottrick's going to be expanding and building and taking tiles and creating resources and selling to market and hiring workers, just like me. And the aim of the game, as I say, is for when the church has all its criteria satisfied, whoever's got the most victory points will win the game. So let me show you a quick round of Hamlet by David Chircop with a solo mode by Nick Shaw and David Turczi. Okay, so we're back up at the centre of the board, and I've got it fully set up now for a solo game. You'll see me as the blue player here. I have my meeple laid down, and I also have my donkey disc there, and that is a donkey, and I'll explain how donkeys work in a wee while. Then we also have the AI, which is Bottrick, and he's got a green meeple. He does not get a donkey. However, he may hire them in the game because they will give him end of game points. Now, you can see the tiles here. And as I mentioned, a key part of the game is it's a tile laying game. So I just want to talk about these sectors that we get around here. You see, sectors have to be legally placed. You have to match up one sector, one full sector with another sector to place a tile. And roads can only ever be joined to roads. So for example, if I've got this particular tile, which is a stonemason tile, and I wanted to place that, and say I wanted to place that just there, okay? I could not place that there. That is illegal, because that road doesn't join on to another road. So you have to do legal placement of tiles. Now, you also see you've got forests and you've got mountains as well. They can be laid against each other, but a road must be laid against a road, and you cannot lay a road against a forest or a mountain. And you can see that there are various sectors. So if you have a look at the kind of hexagonal shape there, each of those sides of a hexagon is a sector. So one full sector must line up with a matching other sector on a tile when you lay the tile. And that's really, really important, you see. It makes sure that the game is oriented the right way, but also creates roadways and pathways and the burgeoning network of roads and paths that you're going to need to fulfill to move your goods back. You see, one other thing that you have to do is when you've refined these raw materials, and I mentioned those at the beginning, you've got wheat, ore and wood, you refine them into your refined materials, such as this wood has been turned into lumber and timber here. You then have to transport them back to the church, but you can't just do that, and that's where donkeys come in. You see, what would happen is, and I may well place some tiles illegally here, but we'll just do it this way. Let's say, for example, here we go, that was there, and then that was there, okay? And I'm going to put a road on just to make it legal, okay? So up here at the top, and I just want to move the camera up a little bit, up there at the top, just up here, we have a refinery for brick. So the stonemason is going to make bricks. Let me just find my little bricks. Here we go. I've got a brick refined resource on there, and I wanted to get those bricks back to the church. Now, what you can do with all your resources, as long as there is a road connecting there, or either that or a path or one of these or a bridge, etc., you can move it to the next the adjacent or an adjacent tile. What you can't do is move it any further than that. Okay, so there's no way that I can actually move that resource from there into the church. It just wouldn't work. So that's where donkeys come in. You see, if I have a donkey on that particular tile, what that allows it is to move it onto the next one, and then subsequently the next one if you have more donkeys. So your donkeys form a chain where the resources can get back to exactly where you want. And that's really important for you. It's not important for Bottrick. Why? Bottrick doesn't use donkeys. He calls in favours, basically. And what happens there is that if there are resources, refined or otherwise, on the map, then Bottrick will just get them back to the church if he wants them. So he has a bit of an advantage. He doesn't use donkeys. So that's how things start there. So as I mentioned, on your go, you got you do two things. First thing is move one of your donkeys. Now, if I was to move my donkey there, that's okay actually. I don't need my donkey here. So I can move it into the quarry there and hope that I can then extend out from the quarry with a road or something that means I can get goods back. So that's the first thing you can do. The next thing you do is your worker action, if you like, or your villager action. And that's this guy here. And what he can do is he can move to or activate a building on the board. He can construct a building adjacent to an existing building, or he can build a road starting from a building. Well, early on in the game, your actions are really, really limited. Okay, so most of the tiles have some form of activation on there. For example, if we look here at the woodcutter, you see there's 3 wood, but say if I didn't have, or there's only 1 wood or no wood on there, if I moved my meeple to there and I then activated, what would happen is it would cause production to happen on that particular tile. And what you would do is you would fill that up by 2, 1, 2, and then I would take the reward, which is next to this, which is actually a 2 gold. So therefore I would take 2 gold, and that's what would happen there. So that would give me 2 gold, and I would have activated that. In fact, sorry, all of these actually start with 2 resources on them, not 3 resources on them. Okay, so that's kind of how you activate particular buildings. That one, I say, that's production on these 3 here. The market is slightly different. What you do when you go to the market is you can trade any of the goods that you've got or that you've produced or are on the board, as long as they're on these red ones here, and then you can get the reward tile at the bottom of that, but there's nothing to do. So in your early game, in your initial game, what you're going to do is you're either going to move to a production to get some more gold, or you may well move down to the town hall, and there are a number of actions that you can take at the town hall. First one is you can buy a tile from the board. Remember we laid those tiles out on the top of the board, so I'll talk about that in a second. And the next is you can hire a worker or a donkey, and a donkey as well, should I say. So you can do both of those actions if you want, and you have the cash at the town hall. So let's talk about buying a tile. I'll move my worker there, and let's say how you buy a tile. So as I mentioned, kind of one of the key things of the game is expanding the hamlet, trying to get the right kind of tiles on the board, making sure that you're expanding and building so you can create those, get those tiles and those buildings which create the resources that you need. Now, anything that's got a bag on the front starts off in the starting bag. You draw 3 on the top here. And quite purely by happenstance, I've drawn landmarks here. So I've drawn a pond, I've drawn a woodland, and I've drawn a trade post. But also in the bag, and I just want to show you this, just to show you that they do exist, you have the refineries as well. So there we have the sawmill, we have the stonemason, we have the flour mill there as well. And those refineries are really, really, really important, and I'll explain why in a second. So to buy a tile from here, if you buy a tile, it goes into your personal area, then at some point you can build with that particular tile. If I was to buy this tile on the left, doesn't matter what the tile is, as long as it's on the left, that would be of 0 cost to me, okay? If I was to buy this tile here, I would take a gold, put it on that tile to the left, take that tile, move those across, draw a new tile out the bag. If I was to buy the tile on the right, I would, of course, place gold on both of those there. And then what that means is obviously take that and replace that. And what that means is obviously whoever then buys those tiles, and that gold can build up, would get the gold on there as well. And that's how you buy buildings, or you buy tiles to put on the board, and buildings and etc. to put on the board and to expand the hamlet. So that's the other action that you can take. So we've had a look at activating. We've had a look at how you then buy tiles from the board. What about how you then construct on the board? So obviously the buying a tile action is purely activating a particular building. That's part of that there. As I mentioned as well, I could spend cash to hire additional workers or additional villagers and donkeys. Your first additional villager is 5 coins, your second one is 7 coins, the third one is 9 coins. But then, say if I wanted to actually build a building, okay, on my turn. So we got from here, and I bought a tile from the market, etc., and I wanted to build somewhere. Well, the first thing you would do is you would place your meeple on any adjacent tile to where you want to build. So I think I may want to build here, so I'll move back into the town hall just there, and I'm going to build this pond, okay? And if you look at this, it's a forested pond, so I have to match it up with at least one section that is forested or of mountainous there. And as you can see, I can put it just there. However, there is a cost for me to do this. And if we look down here, here's the cost. It's going to cost me 1 gold, okay, and 2 wooden resources. Now, as long as those resources are on the board, you can take them from the board, okay? So over here, we have 2 wooden resources, and that's okay. So if I wanted to build this, it would cost me 1 coin. There we go. And 2 wooden resources. And all you do, you don't actually own those resources. They just go back into the resource supply, if you like. Now we have no wooden resources there. So at some point, I may want to go on there and produce more wooden resources, which is fine. It would fill all of that up. I would gain 2 gold coins for that. But we're on the building of tiles now, okay? So therefore, I would put that there. And I would then get 2 victory points for then placing that tile because that's on there. So I paid my gold coin, paid the 2 wood off the board, I placed that tile, it's legally placed, as you can see it's matching up with forest around it, and I got my 2 points. So that's how you then build tiles and start expanding. And as I mentioned, they have to be legally placed. Roads have to match up to roads. You cannot have roads not matching up to roads. So there has to be at least one section that's legally placed, and that works there. But you can see here, it says at the end of the game, all right, so that's a landmark one. So another thing I would do is put one of my little markers on there for the end of the game. But it says on there, 3 victory points if connected by a path, and that's the other action I can take. I can build a road or a path starting from a building, and your network has to be contiguous as well throughout it. You can't just start dotting it around there. So if you look here, I'm starting from the church, and it says here 3 if connected by a path. So I would build a road between 2 areas. Now there are 2 types of road. If it is between a mountain and a mountain, so for example, if I was trying to build between these 2 here, that would be a bridge, and that would cost me 2 wood to build that, which I couldn't do, of course, because there's no wood produced there. And if I was to produce a cobbled path, which is between 2 wooded areas there, that would cost me 2 ore to produce, which I could do because there are ore up there. So what you would do is you would spend those resources, and you would then build a road from there to there. And as you can see, that is now connected. Now, if that was either on my way to where resources were being generated, so like these kind of high value ones, etc., were being generated, then I could use that, place a donkey there and transport it back to there. However, if that path isn't there, I would not be able to use that if that road wasn't there. So if that cobbled path wasn't there, I couldn't do that. So those are the actions you've got. You activate a building, okay, which allows you to do many different things. You can build a tile, or you can build a road, and as I mentioned, that road can either be a cobbled path or it can be a bridge between 2 mountainous areas. Now, if it is a connection between, as I mentioned earlier, you can place mountains and forests next to each other. That's okay, but what you can't do is build a road there, because that's considered a cliff. So you can't build a road if you do connect them that way. So you've got to be mindful of how you are laying your tiles out on the maps, because there are some rules which will stop you making that contiguous pathway. So that's kind of a brief overview on how the game works. And as I mentioned, I don't want to do a deep rules dive. It's a relatively straightforward game to learn. And as you can see, there is lots of different variations in kind of every single game that you play. It's going to play a slightly different way. So let's talk about Botrick now, the solo bot. And this is what this represents down here. Now, as I mentioned, this is all kind of artwork and assets in progress. We've got the 6 discs that we mentioned earlier. So 3 of one colour, 2 of another colour, and 1 of Botrick's colour in this particular bag. And when it comes around to Botrick's turn, the first thing he's going to try and do is take a priority action. Okay, so the first thing is to hire a worker. If he has enough cash, he will hire a villager from the town hall. You would move his meeple onto the town hall. So I don't know if you can see that, what I've just done. You'd move his meeple onto the town hall, and he would hire a worker from there. However, if he hasn't got enough cash to hire a worker, what happens is there's this investor tile just here. And what happens, you would put 1 gold coin on that investor tile. That means that next time it comes around to Botrick, he's got a greater chance of being able to hire a worker, because there's money on that investor tile. That can only be used for a worker action. It cannot be used to pay for anything else in the game. And as soon as it's used, that tile is flipped over until this bag is refilled and restocked again. So that's the first thing he tries to do, is hire a worker. If he can't hire a worker, he will get a gold coin onto the investor tile, and that builds up throughout the game. Next thing he will try and do is he will try to deliver to the church. Remember, the aim of the game is to deliver as much as possible into the church itself, which is just here. So every round he's going to try, if the resources are on the board and it's being generated, and you have these refined resources, then what he's going to try and do is going to try and deliver those to the church. and start putting his little marker discs on there and trying to get ahead of you as quickly as possible. Okay, so that's like action number 2. The third one is he's going to sell to market. So if he can't hire a worker, and the coin goes there, if he can't deliver to the church, he's going to try to sell to the market. So let me just pull up the market tile just here and show you in a little bit more detail what the market tile is. So if we look at this, you can see there is a stack of tiles here, and you're going to flip those over at some point in the game when these have been taken. And here, what he can do is, if he delivered a milk there, he would take that market tile. Or I could do it if I'd got a milk resource, a refined resource, get 1 victory point and 2 coins there, but also, it's also an end of game award for whoever's got the most of these market tiles. When that's gone, those would slide down, that next tile will come up, so he could do that. And also, if you look on the market here, you can see that if you spend 3 gold, you can get some basic resources, or 6 gold, you can get one of the refined resources. Both you and Botrick can do that at any point in the game. So you've got to be mindful of his money building up, because one of the key things on the game, on the church, is to deliver 10 money. And so that's one of the things he can do, but also to deliver some resources as well. If he has enough money, he can buy those resources to deliver to the church and close that off and get the victory points. So these are going back to his priority actions then. So these are the priority actions just down here. However, every turn he won't be able to do he won't be able to do a priority action on every turn. There's going to be times when he just won't be able to complete those, and that's where you move down to these that I mentioned earlier, down to these actions. So you have these 6 discs down here, and here are the rest of the actions you can do in the game. You can build, you can refine, you can produce, you can take a tile, or you can build a road, basically. And that's what Botrick can do as well. So as I mentioned, I'm going to take you. What you would do is you would delve into the bag, which has got these 6 discs in here, and you take one out. Here we go. It's the red one. So we know there's 5 left in there, and we know there's 2 reds left in there now. So that is a build action. Now, if Botrick had a tile, what he would do is he would then build with that tile. He would find the best place to put that tile. However, obviously on Botrick's turn right now, he's got no build tiles. So what does he do then? It's an action he cannot complete. Haha. You move to the next available action that he can do. So then we go to refine. Well, there's no refineries on the board, so that can't happen either. So then we go to produce, and that is an action that can actually happen. So if we go back up to the board, and we look over here, we know I used the wood earlier. So I would I would take Botrick's meeple, and I would put that meeple just there, okay? And I would do a produce action. So he would produce 3 wood. We'll fill that up. So that's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And when the produce action happens, always fills up to the top. And he would get the rewards that were there. So he would get 2 coins as well into his supply. So his coins are starting to grow now. So what happens down back on Botrick's board now then? So we know it was the produce action that happened, because although he drew a red disc out, and that just stays out for the time being now, drew a red disc out, couldn't do build, couldn't do refine, so he did a produce action. We move that right to the back of the line. Those 2 move forward, 1, 2, and that goes there. So we now know on his next turn, he could do either a build action, a refine action, or he could take a tile from the board. So that's how he cycles through, and it's a really simple way of cycling through. He either does a priority action or he does these here. Now, if at any point you use this cash on the investor tile to hire a worker or hire a villager, you flip that investor tile over, okay? And that means that no more cash will be put on that until you've used all the discs in the bag. So all 6 have been used, basically. There we go. And you restock the bag with these 6. So once those 6 discs go back into that bag, you can flip that investor tile over, and then you can start again. If you can't hire a villager or a donkey, then he will put an investor will put gold onto that investor tile. It's a beautifully simple way of creating a human-like opponent in the game, and in a game which has got lots of variability. I think what Nick and David have managed to do is just streamline and create this kind of conveyor belt action down here with increased probability, so you kind of understand, and just like you would with a human player, you'd understand what their strategy is, and therefore there's a higher probability of red coming out, but it does mimic wonderfully how a human player would play. Look, that's a really simplified rundown of how Hamlet plays, and I think you can see that there's lots of strategies that you can employ in Hamlet. You will decide early on, you know, what kind of strategies you're going to go for, and you may have to adapt it depending which tiles come out of the bag. I say these tiles, the refineries, they start outside the bag, okay? So the ones with the actual kind of refined symbols on them. But once you've placed, you know, the first refinery of that particular time that's in the starting tile. So there, for example, if I place the dairy farm, let's just place it there for the time being. Okay, so if I place the dairy farm, I would take all of those dairy farm ones here, and I would then add those to the black bag. And that's how you then increase your chances of getting more productivity, of refining more materials, and therefore the chance of being able to deliver some of these goals for the church. At the end of the game, once the church is done, that triggers the end of round, and as long as the numbers are even, so whoever, you know, as long as you've both taken the number of turns, then you move on to the scoring phase. Scoring phase is the number of victory points that you've racked up, plus some other scoring criteria as well. So I already mentioned these awards that you get throughout the game, but there's also end game awards as well that you can get. So for example, as I mentioned earlier, most church deliveries by the end of the game is going to get 5 victory points. Most buildings at the end of the game is going to get you 4 victory points. So you'd hand out those awards as well as totting up the victory points that have been given in the game. Also got landmark scoring as well. So these are on these tiles that I mentioned. If it's your little wooden thing that's on there, so your marker that's on there, and you fulfill the requirements, you get 1 victory point per segment connected to forest, no road required. So that's really good as well. And you get bridge and path scoring as well. And then you score gold for every 1 point for every 3 gold that you have. You would tot everything up, and therefore you would then get the maximum number. Whoever's got the most number of victory points would win the game. Bottrick scores slightly differently. For example, he gets a straightforward 3 victory points for every one of those, no matter what he says on there. As I mentioned, he will hire donkeys as well, and that's this here, but he won't use them on the board, and he gets 2 victory points for every donkey that he's hired as well, and he gets slightly different scoring for his road. And then you would tot up against Bottrick. Whoever's got the most points would win the game, and trust me, it can be a real challenge. It's a beautiful, beautiful challenge. Okay, so that was a really kind of brief overview on how Hamlet plays and just how simple Bottrick, the AI, is to run. Now, there are difficulty modifiers, of course. You can adjust that difficulty to make the game easier or harder, but as a solo player, you will have no real problem, as there's no real overhead in keeping in the upkeep in Bottrick. It's pretty straightforward to do, but it works in such a way it feels like it mimics some of the strategies that a human player or a human opponent would deploy to work against you in the game of Hamlet. Now, the game is a pure joy to play, and I think, you know, it's no surprise considering just how different and how unique Petrichor felt to play, and how almost relaxing and refreshing Petrichor was to play. Don't get me wrong, it's still a hefty challenge and a puzzle in there. Then it's no surprise that David Chircop would bring that same kind of vision over to Hamlet, and it works exactly the same way. It feels like a summer Sunday afternoon kind of, you know, you can almost smell the wheat in the fields, in the hamlet, in the village that you're trying to build as well. You can almost imagine where you are, and you feel immersed in the game because it's a very, very gentle feeling game. That's not to say it's an easy game, and it's not to say that it's a that there's no challenge here, because there is a challenge here for the solo game. And I think if you play it with other players as well, you'll find out that people of varying abilities will also play slightly differently as well. And I think that is the real beauty about it, is it just evokes this almost summertime feel, this old English feel. You want to complete the church, you want your hamlet to become a village, you want that to happen because you know it's for the betterment of the entire village itself. It's relatively straightforward to learn. I think one read through the rule book and you're going to grasp all the concepts that you need to grasp in that. And I think that's a beauty for it as well. You could probably teach the game in round about 20-25 minutes, something like that. So if you've got people that are new to board games, it's probably a really good, whilst not totally entry level, but a really good way to introduce new people into the board game genre. Show them something that they haven't potentially seen before, because the tile laying stuff is new to a lot of people. Of course, it's a board game without a board. It's got tiles there, and the tile laying is really, really important. This kind of tetron, effect that you have of the different kind of configurations of tiles. You have the, where the woods are, or the mountains are, or where the roads are. And yes, you can connect the woods and the mountains together, but you can't build a path through there. And if you have a road on a tile, then that road has to match up to a road. And if you're producing refined resources right at the end of that road, you have to have enough donkeys up there to then work that back to the church to deliver those refined resources. And I think what it does, and the way that the game builds up from the early stages where your moves are a little bit limited, but not for too long, basically, you will start to grow as the game grows. You will start to understand your strategies as the game grows. And Botrick is doing the same as well. From a solo AI perspective, I think it's a really smart thing here. You've got this mechanism where he's building up enough to hire his workers, and therefore get to the donkeys as well, and get the donkeys out there, and the donkeys are going to score him end points as well. But therefore as well, he's also trying to deliver to the church, and he's trying to sell to the market. So in his first kind of 3 priority moves that he can take, if he will take them, they are a great benefit to him and slight and certainly detriment to you. Then you come to the other actions, the kind of non-priority actions, the 5 actions that you will choose from the disc mechanism. And that's really smart, because they will help him and help you as well. You see, when refined resources are produced, say if I produce a refined resource of milk or of flour, anybody can use that resource. So Botrick could use that resource. If it's my resource, I will score the points, or the rewards are on there, and that's generally a combination of gold and of victory points. Also, if Botrick produces them, then I could use that refined resource, but he would then score those rewards there as well. And that creates a really clever dynamic in the game, because the ability to refine your resources doesn't mean that you should, because if you get your timing wrong, then Botrick's going to nip in there, nick those resources, deliver them back to the church, and before you know it, you produce resources to score more victory points, to get Botrick to score more victory points. So you have to start thinking about when you're going to do stuff, what Botrick is going to do, what potentially are his next moves, and how can I use that to my benefit. And that's a clever part of the AI system here as well, is you're thinking for yourself, and you're also kind of trying to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of Botrick. So it becomes a really nice puzzle that you've got to work out in your head. I think it's a pure joy to play. As a solo game, you can probably play around about 1 hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes, something like that. I think the more you get used to it, you probably get that down under 1 hour, depending on your decision space. You can start, moving through Botrick's goes fairly quickly. The decision trees that you have to take on certain actions aren't extensive, they're not huge, and that is fundamental to the flow of the game as well, because the game is, as I say, it evokes this feeling of a sunny Sunday afternoon in the countryside, and it really does. And I think if you were to add too much complexity to the AI in here, it would drag you out of that. So I think what Nick and David have done here is create a wonderful solo mode which really adds to the aesthetic, to the feel, to the immersion that you get of playing Hamlet. I think it's great. I think you could, you know, for not only for ardent gamers and those of us that love board games, but also for people relatively new to the hobby. And I think, you know, you could definitely introduce it to maybe children of, I don't know, 10, 12, etc. And they would have a really good time doing this, working out those puzzles of where to place the tiles, when best to maximise their resources and refine their resources and trying to complete that church. So it's a game that is going to hit my table quite a lot because I really enjoy the puzzle in this. I think it's a beautifully designed game with a wonderfully designed solo mode from Nick Shaw and David Turczi. And I think if the idea of a game which evokes this sense of relaxation but challenge at the same time really appeals to you, then you really need to go and check out Hamlet, the village building game, on Kickstarter on the 8th of March. The link will be in the description below. Designed by David Chircop, with a solo mode by Nick Shaw and David Turczi, and published by Mighty Boards. So thank you very much for joining me on this journey through Hamlet, a village building game. I hope you enjoyed that. It's a rather brief run through and rather quick run through. You can see that the strategies are varied. And I didn't touch on all the rules, of course I didn't, you know, and how you increase your workers and how you get the church and what happens when the church space starts filling up and how you buy from the market. There's lots of things I didn't cover, and that's okay. I want to leave you to discover those on your own. I just wanted you to have this kind of overview on how the game plays and how beautifully simple it plays solo, but how much of a good challenge it is. So my name's Mark. This is Not Board Gaming. Thank you very much for joining me on this journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos, and one final thought. If you can't find anyone else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.